Hey, this is Everett, producer of The Scalpel, with a special presentation, Dr. Rose, on The Charlie Kirk Show with producer Andrew. Dr. Rose and Andrew go deep into the situation in Afghanistan while the Biden administration takes their victory lap. We learn the truth. This is not over. You're going to learn about the deadly threats the Taliban are making and the actions of the brave people of Afghanistan who love their country and continue to fight for their families and freedom. Dr. Rose and producer Andrew also discuss the latest on the Delta variant, the controversy surrounding Joe Rogan's positive COVID test and treatments, as well as why the vaccine might be contributing to the pandemic's fourth wave. Let's go.
The Scalpel with Dr. Keith Rose.
Cutting down to the truth through history and experience. Subscribe to The Scalpel wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at The Scalpel Podcast, on Twitter at The Scalpel Edge. Email kfr@scalpeledge.com or the website scalpeledge.com.
The next episode of The Scalpel starts now.
I was struck by a very deliberate lack of coverage in the media when it comes to Afghanistan. You can feel this. Even Joe Biden was out doing a press conference this morning. Well, I wouldn't call it a press conference, but he spoke at a podium and almost took a question and then deferred. But he's talking about the economy. He's talking about infrastructure. He's talking about Texas's abortion law, and conspicuously absent in the reporting is anything to do with Afghanistan. And why is that? Of course, it's intentional. There is still a massive amount of news coming out of Afghanistan. There are green card holders and citizens that have been, as one reporter said, been screwed. They are stranded there, although the White House doesn't want to call it stranded. There is a massive mobilization of foreign fighters, of different elements within Afghanistan that are all vying for power. There's the Chinese element, there's the Pakistan element, there's the Iranian element, and of course you have the Taliban now taking control of that country in large swaths of it, at least. So I saw this article. It's actually from National Review, credit where credit's due. American media turn away from Afghanistan. And this is from Jim Garrity. And basically it goes through a whole litany of other stories the media would rather cover than Afghanistan because it polls poorly. And so I said, you know what? We're going to bring back one of the top experts, especially that we've had on our show, that has been right about, I'm not kidding, folks, that has been right about everything that's been going on in country. It's a foreign policy expert, our friend, Dr. Keith Rose. Welcome to the Charlie Kirk Show. Everybody, you're just backed by popular demand. You are absolutely amazing, especially when it comes to this issue. You're also a doctor, so we're gonna actually keep you on for additional segments because I want to talk about vaccines, Israel, ivermectin, Joe Rogan, all that stuff. We're gonna get there, folks. But you have spent a massive amount of time in country, Keith. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to highlight the stories the media doesn't want to talk about, and you've been in direct contact with people on the ground. You have updates for us. The floor is yours.
Sure, Andrew. First of all, we have some good people on the ground working, Andrew. There's a lot of vets, a lot of former Intel community members, a lot of folks that understand that we have a moral obligation to take care of the people that took care of us for greater than 20 years. These people risk their lives for us. A lot of them are not alive now, but their children are alive. And we have a moral obligation as a nation to pay attention, but we also have a geopolitical obligation to pay attention, because what happened, Andrew, and what the American public saw unfold wasn't normal. When we travel in Afghanistan, we always look for things that we don't have to look for the abnormal things. We just have to look for what's not normal. If you know that normal ebb and flow, anything else outside of that, you can go, okay, I got to drill down on that. And that's what we're doing right now. Because when the administration pulled out, what we have found and learned is that while they left all the weapons at Bagram Airfield, they left, millions of rounds of ammunition. They left armored vehicles, tanks, APCs, armored personnel carriers, helicopters, all kinds of machine guns, crew-served machine guns. They left those for the Taliban. What they did destroy was a large ammo depot up in the Panjshir that the resistance needed, the National Resistance Front, the NRF, needed to continue the fight against al-Qaeda, the foreign fighters, and the Taliban. And you can't separate them because they're all working together.
So Keith,
yesterday, they just had a big battle.
Who destroyed
the
that
Americans?
ammunition?
We did. The military. And the military, from what I understand from sources that I have, said that they did it under orders from the Joint Chiefs and the State Department. That's who drove the destruction of that ammunition depot, because a lot of guys on the ground didn't agree with the decision, but they had to follow orders in the chain of command. And last night they had the largest push of Taliban up into the Panjshir through the Shimali Plains in the valley. They're going up into the Panjshir. They had, I believe, the counts are 7,200 fighters, and the resistance front defeated them, Andrew. They beat them back, and they captured hundreds of them.
So I want to establish something here, Keith, because I don't think a lot of people listening know that there's, maybe some people are aware that there is a resistance. So this is Afghanis fighting the Taliban, right? These are what, moderates? Are they secularists, or who are these people, and how big is it?
These are people that love their country. They're Muslim, just like the Taliban, but they're not radicals. They're the people that supported us. A lot of them are former Afghan National Army that we trained, supposedly the group that we supported. They went up and coalesced around their leader, Amarullah Saleh, and his lieutenant, Masood, who is the son of the real charismatic leader, his father, who we called the Lion of the Panjshir. And his dad was killed right before 9/11. So you have these two people they're good strategists. There's a lot of older commanders that are coming up there. There's people that love their country. They're not up there fighting for an ideology. They're up there fighting for their families. There's women and children in the Panjshir. One of the Taliban spokesmen, and I sent you the tweeted out that we are going to go to the Panjshir, kill the men, and make their women our slaves. And America armed the Taliban to do that.
I want to remind you that the president of the United States doesn't have a Twitter, or former 45th president of the United States doesn't have a Twitter account. And yet the Taliban is up there threatening women and children with rape and death and destruction. And these are what the White House is calling, the international actors. They have to determine how they want to be perceived on the world stage. I think they've determined how they want to be perceived on the international stage. I think that they have proven exactly who they are, and yet these are the people that we trusted with the safety of our troops. These are the people that we have essentially surrendered to, and this is what I'm hearing behind what you're saying, Keith, is that this was some deal struck between our government and the Taliban, and we're all stuck with it. We're going to give them all of the weapons, the vehicles, the helicopters, billions of dollars worth of machinery, and we're going to completely turn our back on any other type of resistance movement that's in country.
That's correct. I believe that this deal was brokered behind closed doors by people like Khalilzad, who was leading the peace process. And when Khalilzad led the peace process, he was talking directly to the Taliban. And the Taliban at the time, he started this, I believe, in 2018. Over the past, 2 to 3 years before this peace process even came to fruition, the Taliban didn't do anything that we asked them to, and they did everything that we asked them not to.
I want to give you a chance to explain the promise made by the Biden administration in Afghanistan and how he is once again failing to meet that promise?
Well, Joe Biden came out when people were criticizing the way we were exiting, and he made it very clear that we have over-the-horizon capabilities, meaning we have the abilities to perform airstrikes, if necessary, to kill foreign militants or people that are trying to harm people that are left behind, basically is what he was saying. He was saying we have over-the-horizon capabilities. Well, last night, Andrew, the resistance, which are the people that we left behind, a lot of the guys that worked with us are up in the Panjshir. They just want freedom for their country. And the Taliban attacked them with 7,200 fighters. They captured hundreds of them, and in those hundreds of fighters were several foreign fighters, Al-Qaeda. They captured Uyghurs from China. They captured Chechens. They captured Pakistanis. They captured people from in Europe. They have a lot of foreign fighters that are coming there that are working, and this is Al-Qaeda. So these are the people that Joe Biden said we will give over-the-horizon support for is the resistance to get these kind of fighters. And I would encourage every American to pressure their representative to call the White House, fax, email, carrier pigeon, whatever you have to do to raise awareness, because there are families in the Panjshir that, like I told you before, the Taliban spokesman said, we're coming up to kill you and enslave your families. That's on Twitter because his Twitter account's still active. And so they're sending foreign fighters up into the Panjshir Valley through the Shamali Plains to destroy these people that are Afghans that we trained, who only want to continue what we trained them to do. And the only support that we could help would be not to hurt them by stopping the people that are actually using our armor, our rifles, our optics, our night vision to kill the people that we spent 20 years training. And I think that's something the American people need to understand, because if they fail this resistance front, the super state, the terrorist super state that's going to happen in Afghanistan is going to become a launching pad for terrorism around the world. And this time there will be a quote unquote legitimate player in the world, on the world scene, because China is actually expanding their embassy in Kabul right now. In the middle of all the chaos, China's putting more people into Kabul. You have Pakistan. I sent you a video that was taken 2 days ago, and it shows multiple Iranian intelligence agents and Iranian generals meeting with the Afghans in Afghanistan to discuss their receiving of our vehicles and our armor. So the Taliban aren't just using our equipment, they're giving it to our enemies so they can reverse engineer a lot of our technology. We know that's happening up in China when they're moving the vehicles through into Pakistan. So right now you have China creating their Silk Road through Afghanistan for them economically to get the deep water port through Iran. In addition, they're strengthening their relationship with Pakistan. It's a nuclear country. And at the same time, they're getting our technology delivered to them so that they can reverse engineer it. This is a lose situation for the American people. And there's no way the Biden administration should be able to spin this as anything but an unmitigated disaster.
So just to sum that up for folks, because I know there's a lot going on there. There is a resistance movement of people that used to make up the Afghan military that we trained for 20 years that are still fighting, and they are thousands large up in the northwest of the country, correct? Northwest of the country. And they have coalesced.
They're directly north of Kabul.
And so we have trained these people. They just fought off 7,000 Taliban fighters, and they are the best hope of a future in in Afghanistan to stop the emergence of a terrorist superstate. And Joe Biden has turned his back on these people. You know, we've been talking about Afghanistan. You have some of the best sources on the ground that I have seen throughout this whole crisis and debacle. I mean, legitimately hours and hours ahead of the news cycle. It is a really impressive track record that you have. And I just want to say, thank you for all that you're doing. You've been instrumental in getting a lot of people out that needed to get out, that our U.S. government had made promises to and broke those promises. So hat tip to you and your entire team that you're working with behind the scenes. I do want to transition, however, to the other major storyline, I think, that's going on here, it really in a heightened way, Dr. Rose, came, with the jobs report, missed the mark massively this morning. Dive into the headlines. Yes, we did add hundreds of thousands of jobs, but we missed it by 300,000 or 400,000 based on Wall Street estimates. If you dive into the headlines, it's because Delta. The COVID, the fourth wave, as they're calling it, that's happening across the country, I guess death tolls are rising, whatever. People are worried about the pandemic again, and it's having an economic impact. You've got this Joe Rogan story that is just taking over the national media. I'm going to play Joe Rogan's clip in just a second, but you are a doctor. You and I have been texting throughout the pandemic a lot about different articles. We've got Sweden not allowing Israelis in anymore to travel to their country, and Israel is one of the highest vaccinated populations in the entire world. Help us make sense of this. What's your read on what's going on? Is Delta something that we need to be afraid of?
Delta is something I believe, based on a lot of information that we have now, is most likely out because of the COVID vaccine. Where the first cases of the Delta variant were found were actually in regions where each one of the pharmaceutical companies had what we call phase 3 trials, which were trials with people. So when they started using this vaccine, we started seeing more of this, quote, we started seeing more cases of COVID, and we have this Delta variant. The problem with all this is that COVID in any variant is treatable early with proper medications. And you have to ask yourself why the mainstream media and mainstream medicine, and when I say mainstream medicine, I'm not talking about the actual on-the-ground physicians, but the medical bureaucracy like the American Medical Association, which has less than 40% doctors in them. These big bureaucratic organizations are pushing so hard for a vaccine that when you have early treatments, you can't get an emergency use authorization for that vaccine.
Let's talk about this, actually. I want to get into this. The UK actually just blocked their oversight board just blocked mandating or actually let me get the actual quote here. They have now basically said that 12 to 15-year-olds are not going to be approved for the vaccine. And there was clashes breaking out between protesters and police at the drug regulator office in London ahead of the decision whether to approve or refuse vaccinations for children. So this is what it is. UK's vaccine advisory body, JCVI, refuses to approve vaccinating healthy children aged 12 to 15. There is, quote, insufficient evidence to offer mass COVID-19 vaccinations for this age group. So, and you actually, I've heard you say that you don't even want to call it a vaccine. You call it a treatment, a medicine that is comparable to other medicines that are on. Yeah. Well,
what you're saying is correct. It's experimental gene therapy, but let's just give them the case. Let's pretend it's a vaccine. You just had a Pfizer trial with 20,000 healthy people that were vaccinated and 20,000 people that were unvaccinated. And the difference in the number of people that got COVID in the vaccinated and unvaccinated group was 0.8 to 0.1%, which is, it's negligible.
What's that mean?
It means that the same number of people that got COVID in both groups was the number of people that got COVID in both groups was roughly the same. You see, all the vaccine companies come out and they give their data, and it's interesting the way they couch it. And I can explain this quickly. They say relative risk reduction is in the 94 percentile if you average it across all vaccines. What that means in plain English is that it will decrease your symptoms if you get COVID by 94% of the people. They don't really give a significant how much it decreases your symptoms. They just say it decreases symptoms. It doesn't increase survivability. It doesn't prevent you from getting the disease, and it doesn't prevent you from spreading it. But when they look at absolute risk reduction, and that is prevention of spread of the disease and getting it and dying, it's less than 0.1% across the board. So the absolute risk reduction is not a vaccine. It doesn't meet the standard of a vaccine. Now, separate that into one box, and then come over to, well, why do we have these vaccines in the first place? Well, they say we have these vaccines in the first place because there's no other way to treat COVID. And this is the only way we can, quote, get rid of the disease. Well, that's an absolute lie. I don't know any other way to say it, because I personally, in my clinics, I own several clinics. We've treated thousands of patients with 100% success rate using ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine with other medications early.
Okay. Let me stop you right there, Dr. Rose. I'm going to play clip 103, I believe it is. Joe Rogan talking about this. This has been one of the biggest stories of the last couple days, simply because the left rejoices that Joe Rogan, who they can't control and who is a free speech champion, got COVID, and he was against taking the vaccine. Let's go ahead and play cut 103.
Got tested, and turns out I got COVID. So we immediately threw the kitchen sink at it. All kinds of meds, monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin, Z-Pak, prednisone, everything.
And Joe Rogan goes on to say that he had one really bad day, and then within 3 days he was completely fine. So that's what's missing in this whole storyline. Everybody's saying Joe Rogan, anti-vaxxer, gets COVID. And then the whole point of it is he's saying, man, I threw everything I could, all the therapeutics I could, and within 3 days I was completely fine. I had one bad day. Dr. Rose.
And that's what we're seeing. I personally saw it when my parents at 85 years old and their 90-year-old friend all got symptomatic, severe symptom COVID, and were better in 3 days, and they're doing fine now. You know, Andrew, we're ignoring the actual science, and that's unfortunate, because any vaccination that gets authorized must be, if you get an emergency use authorization, it has to protect against severe illness and death. And COVID-19 now, according to Dr. Ioannidis out of Stanford, who's done the studies and published them, and they have not been contested, showed that the IFR, the case fatality rate for COVID, does not constitute severe illness and death in the population. The numbers are not there. Then they're not being contested. So again, I would ask you, why are we pushing for an experimental vaccine in a population that for 99% of the population is not at risk of severe illness and death?
Okay, well, I am not getting the vaccine. I have gotten COVID. Actually, it was last winter. I got COVID, had a couple bad days, took HCQ, took some other things. I mean, I kind of had the Joe Rogan approach. I'm going to throw everything at the kitchen sink. It was fine. You know, I'm not going to, and now I've seen a ton of reports that basically say, my antibodies are better. My body's ability to fight COVID is much better because I have a natural immunity, which makes complete logical sense to me and to millions of other Americans. And then B, I've also heard that those of us who have natural immunities from actually recovering from the virus naturally, if you get the vaccine, there could be additional health risks for you. So maybe address that too, Dr. Rose. But I also want to hear your take on ivermectin. Is this a horse drug? Okay, let's go through both of those pieces.
Well, yeah, let me unpack all that you ask, and I'll try to do it in order. First, I took the same medications that Joe Rogan took when I got it. And like you, I have immunity now. I'm not just saying I have immunity, but actually the study out of Israel says that natural immunity is better than vaccinated, quote unquote, immunity. And that's a country that is pushing vaccinations, and they're going to their third shot right now.
They're going to booster shots now. That's right.
So that kind of puts that to bed. The science shows natural immunity is better. And the next part of what you talked about was, once you have this immunity and people are pushing for people to get vaccinated, it could trigger you to have more problems through enhancing your antibodies. It's called antibody-dependent enhancement, ADE. And what that does is it makes your antibodies, once you receive the vaccine, hypervigilant. They're going to look everywhere for something to attack. And unfortunately, when you have that happening and you have a gene therapy that's causing the spike protein in your blood cells or your endothelial cells and along your blood vessel linings, you can attack yourself into what we know as an autoimmune process, a hyperimmune process. And we've seen that. The most viral article on Facebook was a doctor that after the vaccine died through a similar process like this. And Facebook tried to censor it, but people made it go everywhere.
And if you think we're just making this up, folks, or obviously not, but I think the CDC even says don't get the vaccine if you've had COVID within 90 days. So they're allowing for this period. They're acknowledging that they know that something's happened, but they're saying after 90 days, you're probably fine.
Well, and the other thing is what you're hearing, and this is a fallacy. It's a statistical fallacy, is that the number of people that are being admitted to the hospital are unvaccinated. There's an increased number of unvaccinated people with COVID-19. They're quoting the statistics from January to June. And during that time, we did not have active vaccination campaigns. So the majority of people that got sick and were admitted and died were unvaccinated. However, since the vaccination, no one's talking about those statistics. And I believe, based on personal experience and the studies that I've seen, the majority of people that are getting sick and going into the hospital are vaccinated patients.
Here was the Israeli study, and this was, I believe, 700,000 people were involved in this study. It says a 27 times increased level of protection from natural immunity versus vaxxed immunity adjusted for comorbidity. Meaning that you are 27 times more protected if you have natural immunity. Does this sound about right, Dr. Rose?
It is, because natural immunity is so much better because it recognizes the virus, and your body, once the virus enters your body, it's attacked by antibodies at the surface. Then when it gets into your bloodstream, it's attacked by your lymphocytes. And to keep this simple, there's two types of lymphocytes, T helper cells, T killer cells. The T killer cells seek out the virus and destroy it. They also do other things, but that's in a 100,000 foot view. So you have good natural immunity. Andrew, when we switch, Dr. Bacardi, who's a virologist out of Europe, who's pretty much the most published person in this space, says that the way the variants are happening in coronavirus, they're only changing by a few nucleotides. So the natural immunity you had to the first COVID-19 is robust and durable and will last you through the variants. But when you take a vaccine to induce immunity, you're making a spike protein in a cell, and you have these killer T cells. They're designed to kill the virus. But the problem is they don't know the difference between the virus and a healthy cell when you're generating the viral component in your cells. And that's why you're getting this antibody-dependent enhancement. And what more important is the paradoxical immunity enhancement, which is where you basically attack your own tissue.
Okay, so I want to talk about something. We are at 1,500, according to the Washington Post today, about 1,500 COVID deaths a day in this country. When we were doing this story a couple of weeks ago, even maybe let's just say a month ago, that was at 300 to 400 deaths a day. So something is happening. Do you think that this is a direct result of more people that were vaccinated, that are now getting infected again, and that may need a booster or something like this to keep it going? Or what's going on?
I believe the people that are vaccinated are still at risk. They may be vaccinated, and then all of a sudden they're not washing their hands as much. They're not, just doing the common sense things you can do to keep from getting an infection. That's a possibility. But I think more likely the highest probability is you're seeing these variants emerge from vaccinated patients. We know that vaccinated patients have viral shedding, and they can actually asymptomatically transfer the virus to other people. And I think you're seeing an uptick in the viral spread. The bigger problem, Andrew, and this is the most important thing people need to understand, is this is a treatable illness. And when I'm seeing deaths, 100% of the deaths that I have seen in my community and other areas where we have clinics and work is that people come in with symptoms. They are sent home and told to come back when they're having difficulty breathing or they're having more symptoms, more severe symptoms. So by the time someone comes back to the hospital, they're already pushed over as far as their systems are already starting to decompensate. Their immune systems are becoming compromised when they could have been treated early. I had a patient the other day who had diabetes, was a smoker, and obese. We treated him and his wife early, and both of them got better. Had they stayed, I've seen other ones that stayed home for 7 days, and by the time they get to the hospital, they're intubated, and it's up by then. It also has to do with your nutrition status too, which will help defend against this.
One quick thing, Dr. Rose, and that's about our kids. 12-year-olds to 15-year-olds. The UK just said there's not evidence to get them vaccinated. We will vaccinate over 12 in the United States. Fauci is basically saying it's a good idea, and he hopes that we're going to get emergency authorization to do younger than 12. Okay, what's your thoughts on this? Kids.
Any vaccination of a child is child abuse, and it will be shown that way. And while the vaccine companies may be immune to liability, the doctors won't, and the people that recommend it won't. The studies are there that show that 100% of kids without comorbid problems that get this virus survive without treatment, period.
Head high, protest line, freedom scribbled on your sign. Headline, New York Times, standing on the edge of a revolution. Hey, hey, just obey your secret safe with the NSA. In God we trust, or the CIA, standing on the edge of a revolution. Yeah, we're standing on the edge of a revolution.
The Scalpel with Dr. Keith Rose.
Give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to The Scalpel wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at The Scalpel Podcast, on Twitter at The Scalpel Edge, email kfr@scalpeledge.com, or the website scalpeledge.com.